Okay, we've been looking at this for a couple of years now. My background's actually a journalist, and I've been running, and then I ended up running companies, running magazine companies. One of the things that's changed over the last 20, 30, 40 years is just how much of a corporate world we now live in. Everything we do, every time we walk down the street, every time we interact with a phone, with a call center, with a government often, it's via companies. Everything that we do, every single second, walking from here to there, is going to be about interaction with companies in all sorts of ways. But actually, this world is almost invisible to us. How this really works, what those interactions between the companies are, between different parts of a company, almost invisible. First of all, what is a company? What do we even mean by a company? It's certainly not this, some bricks and mortar place. It's not even this, a huge multinational headquarters of it. It's actually much more like this. Hundreds, thousands of different companies, corporate legal entities connected together. Something like this. How are they connected? What are the links to each other? What does it even mean? And this complexity, the question, one of the standard things is, what is BP? Is BP a British company? Is it an American company? Who's responsible? Who's liable? This complexity, this difficulty is really great if you're trying to avoid detection, if you don't want to be supervised, if you don't want people to know what you're doing. And one of the groups that really loves this complexity is criminals. World Bank did a report, their Stolen Asset Relief team did a report looking into large-scale corruption. So we're talking about multi-million-dollar corruption. Last year they did this report, looked at 150 different cases of large-scale corruption. And in the majority, they used companies, international corporate networks of companies, to hide the money trails. It also provides powerful incentives to do bad behavior. This is the HSBC money laundering hearings that the Senate had earlier this year, which are actually quite entertaining, and I recommend you have a look at them. This was a part of HSBC, one of the world's biggest banks, that was basically money laundering for Mexican drug cartels, allowing money to flow freely into Iran, all of this sort of stuff. And they did it because, actually, for the people who made those decisions, they were incentivized to do that. That's why we started Open Corporates. That's the point about Open Corporates, to try to understand the corporate world as it really is. To have a database that's freely accessible to all of us, but also openly licensed so that the information can be reused in all sorts of different ways. A lot of information, there's huge amounts of information out there collected about companies. Just the fact that they exist, the registration of them, why even set up a company in the first place? It's to get a distinct legal personality and usually limited liability as well, to allow you to have allow this company to have contracts, to employ people, to have a lease on a building, for example. All of this information, the licenses they've got over here, the citations that they've been given over there, the court cases they've been into, the trademarks, all of this information is all siloed. So our goal is to bring this together and to make connections. We started about just over 2 years ago, and we started with 3 million companies in 3 jurisdictions, the UK, Bermuda and Jersey. We've now got over 70 jurisdictions, including over half the US states. Sometimes we get the information given to us by government. Sometimes we screen scrape it. Many corporate registries, Secretary of State's departments in the US, kind of think their main job is to collect the data, then to sell it, rather than it being a public good. So we've now got over 50 million companies. Actually, it's 54 million companies as of today in 70 jurisdictions. And what does this mean? So what do we do here? So the first thing we do is we create an identifier that we've got no intellectual property in, so that this identifier can be used by NGOs, other companies, governments, you name it, and it maps to those companies. The second thing we do, we start to collect other information about it, from trademarks to government spending and so on, official registers. And then we make it available for anyone, so they can search for all the Goldman Sachs companies, companies named Goldman Sachs, for example, in those jurisdictions that we've got, and we make it available to people under an open license. We're also collecting information about directors as well. So, for example, if you want to search for a director, many places, including Delaware, don't make that information available to you. But do you know what? Those companies also do business elsewhere. If you search for Mitt Romney, you'll find that he was a director of a Delaware company that that had to do a foreign corporation registration in Mississippi. So you can start to get a proper holistic view of a company and find out where else they're going to be directors and so on. So we've now got something over 55 million directorships in the world. What I really want to talk about, though, and we're making all of this information available and making it available through an API. We've now got over 1,000 registered users of the API. It means that the community can start to do cool stuff with it. What I really want to talk about now, though, is corporate structures. Specifically, the complexity of them and what they really like. This is information of a public corporation in New Zealand. We actually have all the shareholding information from New Zealand, matching that to companies and starting to draw these networks. So we got a grant from even though we're a for-profit, and it was great to hear some of the talks this morning. We're quite happy to be a for-profit. If we were in the US, we'd probably be a benefit corp. But we think that this is about giving an incentive for creating a public good. And we think that that's our goal, and that's our business model. So we got a grant from the Sloan Foundation, who are one of the early backers of Wikipedia. And so we've been working for the last 6 months on corporate networks. And this is what we found. First of all, there is actually information about this. We can pull it together, but it's really difficult. And it actually is a bit of a mess. So we're taking things, for example, from SEC filings, which are these filings that the Securities and Exchange Commission collects on public companies, on listed companies, and they file once a year. We're taking it, for example, from shareholding information from New Zealand Company Register, but we're in talks with the UK Company Register and hoping that they will be making shareholding information available in the next 6 months too. For example, from this third set is from the Federal Reserve. They have maintained a database of bank hierarchies, bank holding companies and what they own. And then finally, we're going to be allowing the crowd to contribute to this information as well. And I'll come on to why that's so important in a moment. So this, for example, this is actually live from the site. This is IBM. So what does IBM look like? Well, over here, you can actually see this is the information we got from the SEC. So once a year, they have to say what their significant subsidiaries are. And so we pulled this in, and we pulled all this information in. We take it, we parse it, we match it to companies. This on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, beg your pardon, is actually information we got from the New Zealand Company Register. So these ones on the New Zealand Company on this side weren't actually disclosed on the SEC filings. So you start to get a much better view of it. You also start to see that here, for example, that this company here, this New Zealand company, IBM, International Business Machines Corp, says that it controls the IBM New Zealand, but actually IBM New Zealand says that 100% of its shareholding is from IBM ANZ Holdings Pty Limited, which is an Australian company. So you actually start to see, actually, what they're saying is not quite right. They're saying they control it, but actually it possibly goes through this route. So you're starting to make some sense there. We're also starting to find errors, not surprisingly, in government data sets. This is, for example, on this Federal Reserve database. This is a company, it doesn't exist in Luxembourg. What there is actually is one that's very similarly named, with just 2 of the letters turned around, so it's probably a typo. It's not a Luxembourg company, but it's actually a Cayman Islands company with a foreign branch in the UK. So why do they think it's in Luxembourg? Probably there's a postal address, maybe they were told it and they were lied to, who knows? This company is part of Barclays Bank. So what does a modern financial company look like? And what people, the complexity of these things is actually mind-blowing. Lehman Brothers, just before it went to the wall, its last filings with the SEC, something like 300 subsidiaries in its filings that it disclosed. But the Bank of International Settlement subsequently did an audit of it and found 2,985 different legal entities in it. So this is Barclays. This is a highly simplified view of it because actually it goes even further. If we go to a further depth, this is just 3 steps away from the central company. It's much more complex. It goes even into greater complexity and to greater depth. This is Morgan Stanley. This on the right-hand side is the information from the SEC. This is actually from the bank hierarchy database, bank holding company database from the Federal Reserve. But actually, when you start to look into this, you see some quite interesting things. This, for example, is the main UK company. And actually, this is controlled by a thing called Morgan Stanley UK Group. Now, the interesting thing is this is a PLC, which is a bit like a corporation. And, but this one is an unlimited company, means that it has no limited liability. Why do that? Almost certainly because it's got, because unlimited companies generally don't have as great reporting restrictions. You don't have to say what they're doing. So there's some sort of obfuscation going on there. What it is, kind of difficult to say, but there's definitely something interesting there. Another example, Facebook. So this is the company that thinks all your tiny little interactions, what movie you liked, what book you've just read, all of this stuff, who your friends are, everything is significant about it. So this is what we got from their SEC filings as data. Nothing. So then what the SEC filings do is in text, and it's in pretty much in free-form text. So we basically took this text and turned it into data, and this is what we got. So we got 6 companies, most of which don't even have Facebook in the name. So if you're searching for companies named Facebook, you won't get these companies. So then we started investigating, and we're doing this as part of the crowdsourcing work that I mentioned, and this is why crowdsourcing is going to be important. So first of all, we looked at these 2 companies, two companies in Ireland, and said, well, let's have a look at this. Let's try and understand it just as a test case to work it. And we bought some of the filings that you had to do, and we started to look into it and piece it together. And actually, it looks a bit like this. So these companies, one is owned by Facebook Ireland Holdings. The next one is owned by an intermediary company that you've never heard of. And it goes like this, and this. Just interestingly, 2 things are worth pointing out. On this right-hand side here, Facebook Ireland Holdings International, 999 shares. Facebook International Holdings, Facebook Cayman Island Holdings Unlimited 4, 1 share. The same with the next one. Facebook Cayman Islands Holdings Unlimited 3, 1 share. 1 share. Why do this? We're not sure, but it's almost certainly to avoid it being a wholly owned subsidiary. And we haven't even found the link from Facebook Cayman Holdings Unlimited to Facebook Inc., because actually that information isn't available to you. But because of the SEC filings and because of the other information that we've been pulling in, we can start to make sense of this. So by pulling this together and using the crowd, we can start to make sense of this and we'll get a much better idea of what the world is really like. And actually, what we want to be in a situation is where companies are publishing this in real time, contemporaneously, because otherwise the question is, what have they got to hide? And actually, that's not just for us, the citizens, this is also for investors as well. Are they an Enron? Are they just built on sand? So hopefully that's given you a slightly better idea of what the world is like from a corporate perspective. Thank you very much.